Hi, I'm Dr. Gwen, and my channel is all about creating content that empowers the neurodiverse community. In this episode, Kristen Baird-Goldman comes onto the show to tell us what an integrative therapist is and what it means to be a certified ADHD specialist. We also talk about an underserved population, the high-achieving and visibly successful ADHDers and Autistics out there who just can't get the support that they need. If any of this interests you, stay tuned. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am so excited to welcome Kristen Baird-Goldman, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified ADHD coach. Hi, Kristen. How are you?
Hi. I'm good. How are you?
Good. And I should have said ADHD, certified ADHD specialist, not coach. So I'm gonna redact myself for those of you in the audience. But hey, Kristen, thanks for coming on to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I would love for us to dive into a couple things today because this is your expertise. So we're going to go right in it. But you are an integrative therapist.
Correct.
Hallelujah. But I think what we need to do is help the audience in our community understand what exactly is an integrative therapist.
So an integrative therapist is much like an integrative physician. We look at the whole person. So it's not, particularly in the field of mental health, as a certified integrative mental health clinician, I'm not just looking at the mind and the brain. Our body, our stomach, our gut, which is the second brain, and the nutrients that we take in or we don't take in affect our mind and affect our mood and how we think. And so, particularly in the realm of neurodiversity, a lot of people experience other biological issues and challenges. And we often find a significant amount of deficiencies among like magnesium, all your minerals, vitamins. D can be low, the B's can be low. We look at methylation. There's a lot of scientific evidence showing that these neurodivergent individuals have vitamin mineral deficiencies. And when we can correct some of those deficiencies, it can ease symptoms more than any medication could.
Yeah. So this idea, in the psychological world, we used to call this, I don't know if they still do, but biopsychosocial. It's our way of like thinking about the whole person, right? It's like,
yes,
what biologically, physiologically is happening, what is socially happening, around you. And of course, how are you thinking and what is your experience in the world, right? So this whole person approach, which is so lovely because, I think when therapists don't pay attention to things like diet and sleep, we're missing huge arms of well-being.
yes.
And so I love this. Now, integrative therapy is its own specialty.
Yes.
Right? And so are you also trained to, Kristen, to look at lab work or to run labs? And, you're talking a lot about vitamin deficiencies, mineral deficiencies and things. Got it.
Yes,
Got
so
it.
I'm trained and certified to do that. I found, particularly with the neurodiverse population, there are a lot of labs that we generally want to run because there's a high rate of people experiencing similar issues and challenges with their vitamins and minerals and also, we look at the epigenetic component of what is someone's environment. is a, that nature nurture conversation is a big one in the world of mental health, and I think in integrative practices in general.
Absolutely. Environment is a huge influencer, I think, especially when we have brains that might be more sensitive to sensory stimulation, what's happening in the environment and who is in the environment become critical factors in establishing well-being. So that's really lovely. That's really lovely. So Kristen, so we're kind of defining here what an integrated therapist does, which is an integrated therapist doesn't just say, all right, here's how your mind works. Let's just solve all it's like, let's just get in there and just talk about the way you think, right? An integrated therapist is really going to look at the fact that the brain is housed in, in a physiological and biological system.
Yes, yes.
The other thing that I know I think about quite a bit, and maybe because it's my personal age, but I see this in a lot of women that are getting older, which is the roles that hormones play as well in regards to the way we feel and our mood. Do you have any thoughts about hormones?
Oh, I could spend a whole day talking about the female hormone system and its impact on the brain. Especially when it comes to the neurodiverse population. Um, you know, we know enough to know now that estrogen is directly connected to the dopamine pathway. So if estrogen is low, dopamine is low. And so women often experience their neurodiverse symptoms at a much higher level during premenstrual cycles and during childbearing years. And then when we start to hit the perimenopause and menopause years, I see a lot of women, and including myself, who experience say ADHD in a way they've never experienced before or haven't experienced it like that since childhood. Because you can get to a place of feeling like, okay, I've got this. You hit your 30s, you have figured out your coping strategies, and you're able to manage things really well. And then you add hormones onto having children, and your hormones don't necessarily go back to baseline pre-children, right? Shifts occur. And now you have these other beings in your home, other schedules to be responsible for. It's not just you anymore. It's not just your partner anymore. And it's very taxing on the executive function system, which is already being compromised because the hormones are not providing our brain hormones, norepinephrine and dopamine specifically. We're not getting them the way that we used to getting them. And if you're already at a deficit being neurodiverse, it's like a double whammy. It's challenging. A lot of women who feel like they have really, no one would know they had ADHD, and then menopause or perimenopause happens and people are really thrown. And I think there's not enough education or support out there of people talking about it. A lot of, not knocking doctors, but there's a lot of gynecologists who don't understand this connection or not looking at the connection. And so women are feeling like they're being told there's nothing wrong, your labs are normal, you should be feeling, basically walking away like it's in your head, when we know that's not the case.
Yeah. And that, something that I'm seeing too for women specifically is that hormone replacement therapy isn't the silver, isn't the panacea or isn't the solution, because the lifestyle is so stressed that we can't even touch, the replacement, the hormone replacement isn't even touching what it needs to touch. And so it's a very complicated, I feel like, well-being and mood and how we generally feel in the world is within a very complicated system. I mean, sometimes I feel like we overcomplicate it, but
Yes.
looking at things from an integrated standpoint, meaning you're not just a brain in a jar, is really helpful, I think. You and I connected professionally over a very specific group of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
These high achieving adults that manage ADHD and or autism without many people knowing it.
Yeah.
Right? But that the effort and the burden is real. The struggle, Kristen, is real.
It's very real.
Right? And that when we're masking our symptoms, we're not, and we're just putting our head down and working through things, that hits hits a wall eventually.
Yes,
and
it does.
so, how do we kind of think about this? I'm going to back up too, because you're also a certified ADHD specialist. So talk about that, Kristen. So now we know what functional integration or integrative therapy is. Can you talk about ADHD, having an ADHD specialty? What does that mean?
So, as a licensed therapist, we are, with any particular medical professional, their scope of practice and their scope of competency, right? So it's within our scope of practice to be able to diagnose and understand a variety of mental health issues and challenges and brain health overall. But scope of competency is getting specific training in an area that you can, for lack of a better word, be an expert in. Like you took the additional time to get the additional training to be able to look at one specific area or a couple specific areas. I myself dove into the world of ADHD. I did not get diagnosed until later, until adulthood. And I'm surrounded by it in family and friends and my personal world as well. But, I think it's very valuable as a clinician, when you're seeing therapists, you go on a therapist page or Psychology Today and they list all of the specialties. I think particularly in the world of ADHD, if they are not a certified ADHD specialist, which is a CCSP ADHD, it's truly not a specialty. They haven't really understood all of the different ways of how we look at ADHD. There is no one perfect diagnostic tool. It's getting an understanding through a variety of ways of speaking with an individual. And yes, there's some diagnostic assessments, but it's, with mental health, we can't just simply take a blood test and say, oh, this is what you have. It is looking at the whole picture. And that's where I love the integrative component, because with ADHD or with any neurodiversity, there's more going on. You got to look under the hood and really get an understanding of really what is making things tick and what isn't. So I always encourage people when they're looking for a therapist or someone to help them with ADHD that they make sure that they are a certified specialist. Otherwise, you can't be certain that the person you're talking to has really engrossed and fully competent in that particular area, other than what they may have learned in graduate school. Oh no. Todd? Todd,
I hear you again, Kristen.
I think I froze again.
Yeah, you did. You got a little glitchy. You got a little glitchy. I love it. Are you like, no one better be stealing my bandwidth right now?
Oh, yeah.
Like, get off the internet.
Yes.
At least for another 20 more minutes.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know why I'm having such connectivity issues.
Don't even worry about it. I can edit this. I can edit this part out. Let me just write a note to myself. Okay. That's okay. Don't worry. Yeah, Kristen, let's pick it back up from, competency. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to pick it back up from competency. I think this is like such a great piece. Kristen, I love how you differentiated between scope of practice and competency. And that competency really does lend to expertise. There are so many areas of practice when it comes to mental health and psychology as well, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's one of the reasons why the field of psychology, and I think in mental health, it's so broad and fascinating. Whether you go from sports psychology to industrial organizational psychology, right, to marriage and family therapy, or just family work or couples work. And here we are really diving down into neurodivergence, right? What does that mean? And what do we mean by neurodivergence? I think we mean someone who is not wired in the same way as the neuromajority. I'll just, so that makes things a little bit more challenging, right? Because now there's like, there are societal expectations in the way in which we expect people to, quote unquote, air quote, behave appropriately or do appropriately or whatever successful means. And here we are looking at the unique challenges and the effort spent on living in the neuromajority when you might be wired differently.
Yes.
Right. And not just in the way I think, but in the way I am and feel and what my body is actually doing. We just talked about hormones, which are signals. They're directors, they're conductors of our behavior and our mood. And so really getting control of our hormones and other types of kind of brain-based hormones, it's an important piece to helping someone live more comfortably in the world.
Yes, very much so. And to live in a world that they're, like you stated, they're not necessarily, we're not wired for the way the world is trying to force people to be wired to, right?
Yeah.
But I am a big believer that the more information we have, the more neurodiverse people we are discovering. And, I might be biased, but I think that the neurodiverse individuals are the change makers in this world. If we look at all of the big names of big thinkers and tech and sports and arts and anywhere, there's neurodiversity going on there in one capacity or another. And I think there's something to be celebrated there for that, and that people should feel okay of not having to mask all the time and, feel like they can find their place in a world that they see through a different lens. My hope is that that's going to continue to change. The younger generations are embracing neurodiversity, and I think that's so fantastic. And I hope it continues. But for, baby boomers and Gen Xers and whatnot, there's still stigma there. And I think, there are more people not identified as ADHD than there are people who are identified as ADHD.
Yeah. Yeah. And how many of the professionals that are in charge of the diagnosing have older ways of thinking about neurodiversity? I mean,
Yes.
we're seeing this not only in doctors' offices and psychological offices, but we're seeing this in higher education. We're seeing this in businesses. We're seeing this where we might say on one hand, yeah, we're totally open to diversity, but heaven forbid it gets written down as a recommendation or accommodation, and now things feel really different.
Yep.
And this is a place where I see highly achieving professionals and individuals to really struggle when they have any kind of neurodivergence whatsoever, right? How do
Yes.
I get the help that I need? Because now I've got to disclose. And, you know, if you do have ADHD or autism, there's a lot of barriers to disclosure and advocacy that rest in not only just the social pieces of it and disclosure, but also the executive functioning pieces of,
Yes.
right? How do I problem solve this advocacy? And do I have the bandwidth and the effort left in the tank to continue to do this over and over again?
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I hear from clients, should I tell work? What do I do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and, I don't, it's hard to understand why we support these individuals all the way through college, and why after college is there some magic thing that's supposed to happen that people no longer need accommodations. um, it needs to be integrated into the workplace. It is a hidden disability, particularly when you're high achieving on ADHD and on the autism side. Um, and I think there's still a lot of people who because it's hidden, a lot of people truly don't understand it. So when you appear to be a very high achieving individual, um, but you might struggle with verbal, multi-step instructions, things like that, um, or if you're challenged with time blindness, or there are different organizational aspects that are going on, we are so willing to support these individuals to get through the school system, but to be successful, we have to keep that same mindset in the workplace. Because just because they are very bright or intelligent or appear to have it together, doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't struggling behind the scenes, and that it's at a great cost to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm
And
hoping
go ahead, Kristen.
organizations can
Yeah.
start. I'm just, I wanted to say that, I'm hoping organizations are, now that we're rethinking since the pandemic the workplace, I'm hoping they start to take this into consideration of, we need to really look at what are we providing? Are employees getting all of the supports they need in whatever capacity that might be? Um, and to reduce the stigma that just because there's an ADHD label or an ASD label doesn't necessarily mean that this person isn't competent to do their job.
Yeah. Yes. We are not close to neurological acceptance
No.
than any, I mean, I think it's far behind the other diversity, sex, gender, ethnic, like
Yes.
it's far behind that. And I think that, I mean, when I listen to you talk, I feel like, wow, that's even optimistic that people are getting the right collegiate support. I feel like that drops off right after high school,
Yeah.
just because the legal structure changes. But, you know, how do we, and this is this, I feel like this is more systemic. This is more systemic thinking.
Yes, it is.
Right? Societally, how do we accept this? And this is not an easy piece because this gets really tied up in people's value systems, their political systems, their lived experiences, their religious experience.
Yep.
This is not easy. I think if you're in the audience and you're like, well, what in the world then do we take away from this, Gwen? It is that you are more than just a brain.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you are struggling and it's hidden, meaning you are working like a duck's feet under the water, on the surface, it looks all calm and smooth, but underneath it's a frantic mess down there, that's not because you're not trying hard enough. Getting support from someone who can not only understand your experience of suffering and effort and think about it in this very holistic way is super effective.
Yes. If anything, I want people to know there are people like me and like yourself that exist in the world of psychology, right? That, to seek experts and certified specialists to help promote you to success, because we can't rely on the system to do it for us. And you're right. I was being kind with the school system. As I am something that I, help a lot of families with, because at least it's a conversation in the school system. Doesn't mean the kids are actually getting the support they need, but at least it's a conversation. I also hope for people, particularly adults, to embrace their neurodiversity. And, I like to tell my clients, let your freak flag fly. Let people understand, right, that you are more than just a brain, that there are a significant amount of gifts and strengths that you have to offer. And people will continue to not see the struggles. It's okay and it's acceptable to see them. And I think people need to understand that, but it's not, people fear what they don't know. And so the more we can educate others, not just in the clinical realm, but in the population, when other people can educate other people can educate their employers and their human resources, I think we will start crossing some of those borders that we need to. But originally it's about, seeking the support and the sources that are going to help empower you to get to that place.
Yep. And that you don't need to work harder. I think that's another piece. Like, it's working differently. Yeah. It's getting support because it's okay to get support. It's okay to get support because your ADHD isn't made up in your head. It is, right? Yes. The autism is not a made up construct. And so this idea of awareness and acceptance is so big, and that it feels big because it's in a system that is still largely biomedically based. And so it's very defined based on deficit. And so that is really challenging to come out of. But I love this. I love this conversation, Kristen, So for those of you out there, there is something called integrative therapy.
Yes.
That looks at the whole person. Yay. That there is such thing as being a high achiever and still suffering and needing help. Yeah. That does exist.
That does exist.
Actually, you are the most hidden ones, the not disabled enough ones that tend to really fall through the cracks. This is where I think the advocacy is really critical. And that there are people out there. And so maybe some of the ways, if you're looking for a professional to support you, you can ask some of the questions that, Kristen brought up, are you certified in ADHD? How about what is your experience with neurodiversity? How about things like, what else do you look at, as a therapist? What are some of the factors that you uncover in the work when I'm trying to figure out how to solve this problem, that I have? Those are some good ones. Kristen and I were off camera. We're just talking about how much our clients educate us, and that we've learned so much from our clients, so much more, I will say, than I ever did in grad school.
Yes.
So, asking a professional about their experience with neurodiversity and what proportion of their clients are neurodiverse is not a bad question to ask. If you are wondering. So those are just some action steps if you're looking. But Kristen, thank you so much for coming on, for talking about integrative therapy, for being in the space. If someone's listening to this and they're like, ooh, I want to know, I want to reach out to Kristen. What's the best way to do that?
So there's a variety of ways. My practice is called Baird Integrative Therapy. And we are a psychotherapy and ADHD center. So specialize in the neurodiversity realm. It is Baird Integrated Therapy .com. And I can be reached through that. I also offer neurofeedback for people. So that is a component of what we provide. And I released a book this past September called the ADHD Workbook for Adults. It's a cognitive behavioral model, a very modern cognitive behavioral model with mindfulness and some acceptance and commitment therapy, and that's on Amazon. And I have an Instagram, the ADHD Guru. I am not always great about posting, having ADHD myself, but I'm getting there. And I am going to be in the midst of putting together an auditory companion to the book, sort of like a podcast session of all of the strategies and sort of breaking them down bit by bit, because understanding the population, not everyone, reading isn't always a strength or a way of gaining information. And so I've had a lot of people request this. And so I'm planning on putting together sort of training podcasts to help them through the process, particularly for auditory learners. It can be really helpful. And I think it's just another support system to try and develop the strategies that I've put in the book. So hopefully that'll be coming out this summer.
That's amazing. I will put all of that information in the description and the show notes. For those of you in the audience who are like, I didn't get it. That will be listed. We're going to have you back and talk about your ADHD workbook, Kristen.
Yeah, I'd love that.
More specifically, let's do that separately from this. But thank you so much for, again, coming onto the show and sharing some of your wisdom with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Gwen.